Hello, my fellow comic book collectors. That's Alan, the Comic Collector Geek, and this is going to be an interesting video. I've never done this before, where I'm actually going to do a live market report, where I'm going to show you the biggest sales that have happened for Heritage this week. Um, they're pretty big sales, pretty big books. Because I don't have, like, normally when I do these market reports, I have like an image next to me. I just happened to have all of the books that had the biggest sales. So, not bragging, but mine are lower grade than the ones that sold. But I have copies of the books that were in this Heritage auctions. It was a big sale, some really big books, and I basically just took all of the best records. Like literally, I just filtered based on what were the biggest sales of this week, and these are the ones. And it's an interesting list because it's not quite what you would expect. Hi, Matt. And I really wanted to do a proper analysis. Often I do these shows with Mark Oldroyd, but he's away for a little while. I think he's away for the next 6 weeks, actually. And we've pre-recorded a bunch of videos. So on Monday, we actually have a pretty cool video. And then we actually have some pretty fun ones that we've recorded. So definitely check out the Monday videos, but we don't have market reports. And I figured, hey, I hope people enjoy these market reports where I look at the hottest Silver Age for the week. And Heritage is actually kind of like the pinnacle for where the biggest sales generally happen in the comic market. And these are the biggest sales. These are the ones, the biggest ones for the week. I mean, there's probably every so often you have what's called like a prime auction, and those are the massive sales. Those are the ones where you see the $1 million sales. Well, this is not that level, but these are sales of books that we know and we're familiar with. And I wanted to show you how well these books performed. And I also want to give you a sense of how the market performed historically compared to where it is now and during its peaks. And it paints a full picture once you see those 3 points. So generally, when people look at the market, they have very short-term memories. It's the funniest thing. So people think, okay, well, in COVID, this book sold for $1,000. Now it only sells for 500. Oh, the comics are becoming worthless. Well, they don't look slightly further back, and that book actually sold maybe for $200-300. So the market is actually stronger than it looks, and I want to get into that when I show you the list. So I kind of wanted more people to show up, so I'm kind of building it up. But I'm going to get into the books. I'm going to show some pretty cool books and do a market report. So the first book, number 10 on the list, is Amazing Fantasy number 4, and that's this one. So basically, Amazing Fantasy number 4 is the first appearance of the Sandman. It's a Steve Ditko cover, and this is from Marvel 1963. It's just a classic character for Spider-Man. I think Sandman has appeared in 2 or 3 movies. And it's just a major one, major character for Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery. The one that sold is not a 2.5. It was a much higher grade. It was an 8.0, and it sold for $5,080. Now, that is actually down compared to the record that the book sold for. The last record sale was set back in October of 2022 for $10,000. So it's about half of where it was during the peaks of COVID. However, if you look at the pre-COVID price, so March of 2020, like literally at the very beginning, just before the lockdowns and all that kind of stuff, it was selling for $3,750. So if you kind of look at that, this is right in line with where you would expect the book to be, maybe even a little bit high. So a lot of the time I refer to it as the COVID blip, where the COVID prices you can almost just ignore because they're outlier sales. People were getting their stimulus checks. They were, they were spending as if there was no tomorrow, and the prices had kind of gone through the roof. Well, this is much more in line with historical values for these books. And actually up. I mean, it's from 3,700 pre-COVID to now at 52.80. So it's actually a pretty strong sale. So just kind of want to give some positive news for the market. So there are 3,270 of these on the census, and 2,864 of them are universal blue labels. Number 9 on the list is another great book. This is one I consider like the book for Marvel in a way, for the Silver Age. It is really the book that started Marvel Silver Age, actually. And it actually is the very first published book for Marvel, the Marvel Publishing Company. And it is Fantastic Four #1. So Fantastic Four #1 is from Marvel, 1961. It is a Jack Kirby cover. And it is the first appearance of the Mole Man, first appearance of the Fantastic Four, which are like Sue Storm and Johnny Storm and Mr. Fantastic and the Thing. So it's got all the major characters that we kind of love for the Fantastic Four, their first appearances in this book. Now this is like, as I said, this is the book that kind of made or break. It was the make or break kind of comic for Marvel. So at the time, Stanley basically had one kick of the can left, and he chose to make Fantastic Four to return to superheroes. At that time, Marvel had sort of moved away from superheroes, and their company was about to collapse. They had several like brand names that they were using. They were, at first it was Timely, then it was Atlas, and they decided to go back to being Marvel. And this was their attempt to really bring back the company. And it was a success. And it's the Fantastic Four are considered Marvel's first family. And they really were interesting family, very dysfunctional, but they are Marvel's first family. And so this book was a 1/5 that sold on Heritage, a blue 1/5, and it sold for $5,760. And it looked really like everything. There was no way you could upgrade it. It was a 1/5. It looked pretty like almost like some disaster happened to the book, actually. It was really rough. But it was sold for $5,760. Now, the previous record for the same grade of 1/5 was set back in June of 2021 for $13,800. So this is almost down a third of what it had sold for at the peak of the comic prices. However, the most recent sales, and even prior to COVID pricing, this book is actually pretty much in line with what the book had been selling for. The most recent sale for this book was set back in January of 2024 for $5,760. So the exact same price. It just really confirmed that this book has kind of hit the floor. And it's sort of staying steady at that $5,760 price. Just so you know, my book is a 5.0, restored, and I think I paid under 5,000. I think it was like 4,000 something. So this is why you get restored sometimes, because you get a much prettier book than those blue labels sometimes in the low grades. Okay. Next one on the list, number 8 on the list, is Tales to Astonish, number 35. This is an interesting book because it's one where they basically retconned a previous character. So during the age before Marvel, Marvel had really been creating anthology books where it was like just interesting stories, like tales of suspense, tales to astonish, these kind of interesting stories. And one of the stories was a man who shrunk himself down and was battling with ants and had to return to his original size. And his name was Henry Pym. And that was in Tales to Astonish 27. And after the success of Fantastic Four, well, they decided, hey, maybe we could, bring this character back and retcon him basically, and give him a special suit. So they gave him a special suit and made the Ant-Man character. So generally, Tales to Astonish 27 is considered to be the first appearance of Ant-Man, and 35, which is this book, is considered to be the first appearance of Henry Pym in costume, or Ant-Man in costume. And it's also the first time, it's his second appearance, But it's also the first time he gets, like, some of the things that he gets, some of his powers that he gets with the suit. Okay, so this is from Marvel, 1962. It is Jack Kirby and Dick Ayers cover. And the one that sold on Heritage was an 8.0. And it was a signed copy. That's really important to understand. It was signed by Stan Lee, and it sold for $6,600. The previous record for this book in a 8.0 was set back in December of 2018, so long time ago, like 6 years ago, for 3,800. So it has gone up quite a lot since that, uh, 2018 sale. So it really shows that this book has gone up over the time. However, there is some bad news about this in terms of Stan Lee. Something about getting Stan Lee's signed books actually reduces the value. I don't know why, but it's weird how that works. So the previous record for an unsigned copy, a blue label, was set back in July of 2021 for 11,000, which is a fairly significant amount above where this signed copy has sold for. However, the most recent sale for unsigned blue label copy of Tales to Astonish 35 was set back in February of 2022 for $7,800. So still over $1,000 above where the signed copy sold for. So compared to the blue label, it's actually less valuable. It's really weird how that works. So yeah, so I'm not sure why. I can't explain it, but it is weird how the signed ones generally go for less, which is not what you would think. It's kind of counterintuitive, especially getting a Stan Lee signature. There are 1,168 of these on the census, and 1,002 of them are universal blue labels. Next one on the list, number 7 on the list, is Tales of Suspense number 39. Another major book for Marvel. A lot of these early Silver Age books were really introducing characters to the Marvel universe. And Tales of Suspense, Tales of Suspense number 39 introduces Iron Man. And it's kind of an iconic cover, and it's an iconic character. This is from Marvel, 1963. It is a Jack Kirby and Don Heck cover. Don Heck is actually very famous for Golden Age pre-code horror. And it is the origin and first appearance of Iron Man. Now, on Heritage, they had a 4.0 copy that came up, and it sold for $7,800. The previous record for this book is this one's a little bit of a shocker in terms of the drop. The previous record was 18,000, set back in January of 22. So, um, yeah, this book has dropped significantly from the COVID peaks. The last sale, though, it's even down from the last sale. The last sale was in February of this year, and even that was much higher. It was selling for $12,000 in February of this year. So it's down $5,000 from what it sold for just in February. Massive drops. This book is really, really going down. And I'm not really sure why. I mean, Iron Man is a loved character, and it could be the fact that he's no longer in the MCU. Rumors, there's no real rumors around the character, but so it looks really bad for this book. However, there's always a however. Um, the pre-COVID price, so back in March of 2020 pricing, this book was selling for around $6,000. So it's actually up still compared to the pre-COVID pricing. So if we kind of follow the old trend line and get back to that timeline, maybe, um, this is right on par with what you would expect this book to sell for. Even though it seems really down, even down from earlier this year. And it's sort of what's happening is a lot of these books are just coming back to those old trend lines. Um, a lot of like one of the things that people really need to understand about the COVID pricing is it was a very unusual time in terms of comic book market. Um, what happened was you got people stuck at home. They have a whole bunch of extra money, and they're actually getting stimulus checks as well. Um, and they have no real outlet to spend that money. And a lot of people saw it as an opportunity to buy something like luxury items, something that they would normally not buy. Um, and comics were that way. And the prices for comics were going up like almost weekly. You could say, oh, you buy one day and then you can flip it for the double the price kind of thing. And that excitement caused a very speculator kind of market. I mean, I saw the same thing in the 90s. When you get a lot of like hype and a lot of excitement, well, that really does translate into people overpaying for books. And sometimes you got to kind of be realistic about the pricing for these things. You got to look at those historical trend lines. I was warning people at the time, like, kind of these are overpaying for these books. Gotta be careful. Um, Now things are becoming more in line. Uh, we're actually not at the deal rate yet. So some of these books you'd think, oh, these are really great deals because it dropped so much, but we're really not there yet. It's not like the books have gone through the floor that they had set in previous years. They are actually still holding their own and actually going up as they would have based on the trend lines. So we haven't gotten to the thing where, oh, it's like a fire sale and you're going to get really cheap books. Doesn't quite work that way. But it is an interesting time. There are 2,811 of these on the census, and 2,005 of them are Universal Blue Labels. So that was a big sale, 4.0 for 7,800. Number 6 on the list is Incredible Hulk #1. This one, I actually have a pretty interesting story to tell you about it. So this is Incredible Hulk #1, and the sale, this is from Marvel, 1962. It is a Jack Kirby cover. It's the origin and the first appearance of the Hulk. It's also got Rick Jones, Betty Ross, and General Ross are all inside this book. This is kind of another one of these classic characters being introduced in the early 60s. We got the sale that happened on Heritage was a 3.0, and it sold for $10,800. Now, that is actually a very interesting sale because of all the Marvel books, Hulk 1 had actually been performing the best of all the books for the Silver Age. Pretty much most of the books had corrected since the COVID pricing. However, Hulk 1 had actually, for the most part, maintained its pricing and actually gone up beyond the COVID era. And that's a good thing and a bad thing. Okay. Um, so what has happened, and this is what happens with anything, is when uh, a lot of these books that are on the list, what you'll notice is some of them don't come up that often. And what it is, with the pricing kind of going down and people still having in their minds these really super high COVID pricing, or maybe they even bought during that super high COVID pricing. Well, they're holding on to those books. They're not going to be like, they don't want to lose $5,000 or $10,000 selling a book that they paid for at the peak of COVID. So what's happening is books are not really coming to market as much for certain keys. Like, people are just tired of losing money on them, unless they get really desperate and then they have to. But with Hulk, we got a different story. The pricing hasn't dropped; it has continually gone up. And what's happened as a result is, for the first time, like, Hulk 1 is a rare book. It's not one that you see that often. However, because it's one of the few books that actually held its value, what's happening is people are actually bringing it to market. I'm actually seeing more Hulk 1s that I've ever seen. It's weird to see, like, it's consistently at week after week a Hulk 1 being on the list or being available at Heritage. It's just not normal. Maybe a few times a year, but not like every week. It's just insane. And that's because people are still seeing it as a way to get some of their money back out of the comics. However, this time, you know, if too many books come to the market, well, there's just not enough buyers for those expensive books. And what ends up happening is what happened with this book this week. So this book sold, as I said, for 3.0, it sold for $10,800. Well, that is massively down because the previous record for this book was set back in August of 2021 for 27,500. And the last sale in March of this year was for 13,800. So it is down in, like, more than a third, about a third of what it sold for at its peak. And it's even down another 30% from what it sold for earlier this year. However, there is good news. Like, the sky is not falling. Don't worry. It's not time to burn all your comics because they're worthless. Don't worry. Um, the pre-COVID price for this book was around $8,400. And that was the kind of the pricing that you would have paid for in January of 2020. So it is up still 20% from the previous, pricing that this book had. And it is staying within that old trend line. It's kind of returned to the old trend line. So definitely not as bad as it might appear. But as I said, this was one of the few strong performing books, and it really hasn't been able to maintain that strong performance. Um, the census for this book is 2,140 all labels, and 1,506 are universal blue labels. So it's a very low census count for a Marvel #1 issue. The next book on the list, number 5, is Amazing Spider-Man #1. This is from Marvel, 1963. It is a major book for Spider-Man fans because it is the first titled comic book for Spider-Man. It's also the first time you get a crossover between the Fantastic Four and another book. So you got Fantastic Four and Spider-Man in it. It's also the first appearance of John Jonah Jameson, or J. Jonah Jameson. And it is the origin of Spider-Man retold. And it's the first appearance of the Chameleon. So just a really great book. It has so much going for it. And it was a cover created by Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko. So this one was an interesting sale. It was a sale for a 5.0 copy, and it sold for $11,700. Now that is actually, sorry again. Like, I feel like I'm the bearer of bad news because everything is down, like, just consistently. The previous record for this book was set back in November of 2021 for $31,200. So again, it's down by a third of what it had sold for. And it's actually down from earlier this year, where it in April of, so last month, it had sold for $12,505. So it's down another 10% from even just last month. Um, and again, I think what's happening is these books are kind of coming back to the trend lines. So if you're buying, try to look for that price near the trend line. So what is the trend line? Where should this book kind of be? Well, the pre-COVID price for this book was set back in February of 2020 for $9,200. So that's what it was selling for back then. And so you would expect this book to be in that $10,000 range. So this book could actually drop a bit more to get to that trend line. So it's selling for around 11,000 right now, and it probably could drop down a bit more to 10,000 even. So that's what you got to watch out for. So look for those trend lines. Go to, Go Collect or whatever it is, look at the trend line, and you can kind of predict where these books are going. Where is it going to finally bottom out? And you can kind of figure it out. It's not rocket science. It's, looking at a line basically. And these books sell enough that you actually have a pretty good sense of their value in terms of their trend lines. So still maybe a little bit overpriced, has a little bit more room to drop, which is kind of bad news if you did pay those higher prices. But it is still a great book. I personally love it. I loved it enough to buy it myself. um, so yeah, so there are 4,869 of these on the census, and 3,451 of them are universal blue labels. Number 4 on the list is another great book, another one that really starts the whole Marvel universe, and the universe within a universe, I'd like to think, because you got Fantastic Four, and the other big team that you can think of is X-Men. X-Men #1, where it really sets up the whole concept of mutants in Marvel lore. And this is X-Men #1. It is the first appearance of pretty much every character that's on the cover. So you got Angel, Beast, Jean Grey, and then you got Cyclops, Iceman, and Magneto. Also, it's the first appearance of Professor X. So all the major characters for X-Men. And this is from Marvel, 1963. It is a Jack Kirby cover. The one that sold is much better looking. This one's this is my copy. The one that sold on Heritage was a 5.0, so 10 times better. And it sold for $13,200. Now that is also down. The record for X-Men #1 in a 5.0 was set back in April of 2021 for $28,444.33. So that was the record for this book. There was actually a sale that happened in December of 2023 that kind of is in line with this price. The last sale was for $13,200. So exact same price. So this basically has hit the floor and sort of stopped. Now, again, you got to look at those pre-COVID prices to get a sense of where the trend lines are, where this book should be in terms of its value. If you look at like March of 2020, this book was selling for around $9,995 was the sale that happened at that time. So around that $10,000 mark. It was just shy of hitting the $10,000 mark pre-COVID. And this book is sort of in line with that. It's gone up about 30% from that pre-COVID pricing. Maybe it has a little bit more room to drop, but from the current sale and the previous sale, it seems to be sort of at that floor. There might be some reason for this book to be slightly stronger than what the trend line might say, and that is actually a couple things going on. One, Fantastic Four had, not Fantastic Four, but X-Men had, for the most part, been a little bit irrelevant because the MCU had really been promoting Avengers and that side of the Marvel Universe. Well, recently we have X-Men 97, and we also had in um, the Doctor Strange movie, we had Professor X appearing. And those things have brought back some interest in X-Men. And we know that there's an X-Men movie coming up in the future. So there's that future spec, there's the current spec, there's recent past spec that didn't exist when prior to COVID. And what's happening is we have a little bit more of enthusiasm around the X-Men characters. The X-Men 97 TV series has been well received, and actually the books relating to that series have actually performed quite well compared to what they had sold for last year. So there is some hope for these books. And this is, as I said, it's a strong sale for X-Men 1 compared to what it sold for prior to COVID. So some good news. I like to give some good news here. Okay, next one on the list is number 3. It is Journey into Mystery 83. And this is from Marvel, 1962. It is another Jack Kirby cover. Jack Kirby sort of was the dominant artist of the Silver Age. And this is the book, Journey into Mystery 83. It is the origin and first appearance of Thor. And it's just a classic cover, another classic cover for the Silver Age. Now, the one that sold on Heritage was a 5.5, and it sold for $13,209.60. And the previous record, though, was set back in October of 2021 for $23,580. So it's down about half compared to some of these other books that have been down like to a third. It's not that bad, I guess. I don't know what to say. Now it's actually up compared to a recent April 2024 sale, where it sold for $12,111. So it's actually up about $1,000 from what it was last month. Fairly strong sale. And it's actually up significantly compared to what it sold for during the early parts of COVID. So October of 2020, this book was selling for around $8,988, so around $9,000. So it's up about 40% from what it sold for before COVID. So very, very strong price for this book. I actually think it might have been still overpriced. Sorry to say that, because I love the book. I do love the book, but it is maybe down. It maybe has a bit more room to fall. I would have expected this book to be more in that $11,000 range, and that's just me being practical. That I really do think these books will go back to the trend line. There is no real spec related to Thor that could give it extra hype or like importance. The character is kind of done in the MCU. So I'm not sure why it's held its price so well. But it could be due to the fact if you look at the census for this book, it's actually got a pretty low census count. There are 2,479 of these on the census, and 1,857 of them are Universal Blue Labels. So almost in line with what the Hulk 1, which I always say is a rare book. It's very similar to that, and you would expect that in a way because uh, Journey into Mystery 83 is kind of later in the whole Journey into the Mystery run. It's not like a number one issue where everyone clamors to get it and save it because it's number one. It must be it must be worth something. Well, 83 is just sort of mid-run. It's just sort of an odd number. So probably not many people were buying it and didn't really expect a major character to be released in it. So as a result, you get a kind of a lower census count for this book. So just an interesting one. Very strong sale, even though it is down, as I said, about half where it was during the peaks of COVID. Number two on the list is an interesting one. It's one that it, my good friend Mark Oldroyd always, whenever he sees this book, he gets very upset. He just he because it's always on the list. It's a book that you see on the list all the time, and he's just tired of it, I think. So it's a cool book though. It's Amazing Fantasy number 15, and it is the first time we get Spider-Man. So this is from Marvel, 1962. It's a Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko cover, and it is first Spider-Man in comics. It's the first full, like there are actually prototypes for Uncle Ben and Aunt May, but this is their true first appearances. And then we also get Flash Thompson and Liz Allen make their first appearances in this comic. Now, the one that's sold on Heritage is a little bit different than some of these other books because it was not a CGC copy. It was a CBCS copy, and it sold. It was a 1/8 that sold, and it sold for $14,400. Now, it was interesting one because sometimes when people generally prefer the CGC slabs over CBCS. And the reason for that is there's more market certainty around the CGC books. The grading criteria are a little bit different between CGC and CBCS. So, for example, this book, the 1/8 that sold on Heritage, had a cover and centerfold detached. Now, it was a 1/8, so that's actually well within what CGC would call a 1/8 as well. But that kind of extra notation actually can work against a CBCS copy much more so than it would against a CGC copy because people, they're not as familiar with the grading standards of CBCS. So just something to be aware of. And generally what you'll notice is if you look at how much, like the price difference between a CGC copy and a CBCS copy, you'll notice it's about 20% lower for cheaper to get a CBCS copy. Just something to be aware of. If you have a big book, get it slabbed by CGC. It's probably worth the extra costs. Now the last CGC sale for this book, just to give you a sense of the difference in price, was set back in April of 2024, so just recently. One that was a 1/8 CGC copy sold for $16,200. So the difference between CGC and CBCS was about $2,000. It makes a big difference. And the CGC record for this grade was set back in September of 2021 for $28,100. So this book has dropped a little bit less than 50%, but has dropped significantly. Now the CBCS record, this book hasn't actually sold in a 1/8 CBCS copy for a really long time, so there is no like recent sale that we can kind of compare it to. But there was a 2019 sale that sold for $11,000. So this book is actually up compared to the 2019 price, and it just shows you how these books have actually been performing quite well. They they are consistently going up over time. Ignore the COVID peaks. Ignore that bubble. If you ignore it and you see the trend line, these are right on the trend line. These are performing well. Now, the other thing that's interesting with these, as I said, it sold for $11,000 in 2019. It's up roughly 30% from that 2019 price. Is the fact that these books, especially Amazing Fantasy, had kind of an interesting kind of event that happened. Back in, I think it was in 2020, maybe 2020, 2021, around that era. I'm trying to remember when the sale happened. It was, it had a record, a massive record. I mean, like Amazing Fantasy had been the #2 book in terms of the most valuable books. Whenever people think of the big books, they would think of Action 1, Superman 1, and maybe Amazing Fantasy in a high grade, in a high grade. But back then there was a $3.65 million sale, and that really had a massive impact on all the books within all the different grades of Amazing Fantasy. That 3.65 million was for a 9.6 copy of Amazing Fantasy, and that high grade copy selling for what had become the highest value that any comic had ever received by that point really did have a massive impact on the market. And what happened was people who love Spider-Man, and there's a lot of collectors for Spider-Man, thought they would never be able to afford one. I mean, if it's $3.65 million, that's insane. That's huge amounts of money. Who can ever afford a comic of that value? Well, what you saw is all of the grades got a massive boost in price. So because of that, you would expect the reverse to happen once the market kind of settles itself out. And even that $3 million one probably was somebody overpaid for that by about $1 million, I would say. So what happened is, like, it really was the thing that actually was the spark that really ignited the COVID boom, because that fear of missing out, and especially in a major book like Amazing Fantasy 15, really did hit the market in a very special way, where it really started fueling this drive to get anything, And the lower grades actually had the biggest boost during that time because they were entry-level copies. So, just something to be aware of. This is not a rare book for in any stretch of the imagination. There are 3,887 of them on the census, and 2,540 of them are Universal Blue Labels. So a fairly common book compared to some of these other ones. Like, as I said, it's got twice as many of them compared to Hulk, compared to Journey into Mystery. So something to be aware of. So what's number one? What's the number one book of the week? Well, it's been Marvel, 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 Jack Kirby, Jack Kirby, Jack Kirby. It's like all this Jack Kirby stuff. Well, the number one book for all the DC fans out there, well, it's a DC book. And it's a very interesting one. It is Showcase #4. This book is a very special book. It is from DC Comics, 1956. It is considered to be the first Silver Age comic because it represented not only the fact that it had the Comic Code Authority stamp on it, but it represented a real shift in what the comics were going to be about. It was about superheroes now, and they introduced the Flash, Barry Allen. And it also introduced Iris West, and it was a major comic for the Silver Age. So this is the book that really started the Silver Age. It's usually the one that people say, hey, what is the first Silver Age comic? I'll mention this one. It is a Carmen Infantino cover and Joe Kubert. And it's just a major book for DC and for comics in general. Now, the one that sold actually was similar to this one. Another CBCS copy, and it was a 3.0 that sold, and it sold for $15,000. Now, the previous record for a CGC 3.0 was set back in May of 2017. So a 3.0 copy for CGC hasn't actually sold for a long time. And that was a $12,755 sale. So this book, you just don't see it that often. Like, when you see the difference in Marvel compared to DC, in terms of census counts, you'll get why you don't see these books that often. So there was no CGC sale of a 3.0 since 2017. And as I said, it sold for $12,755. So it's up compared to that previous record from CGC. But there was a CBCS copy that did sell in March of 2018. And now here's some bad news. I was saying all those trend lines, those historic trend lines, oh, look at the pre-COVID stuff, look at, look at all that. Well, how did this book perform compared to its pre-COVID pricing? Well, there was a CBCS 3.0 that sold in March of 2018 for $18,240. So this book is actually down $3,000, about 20% from its 2018 pricing. Massive drop. So it's one of those things. It is what it is. It has dropped quite a lot. And if you look at the census count, this book is extremely rare. There's only 598 of these on the census, and 431 of them are universal blue labels. So a really rare book, hard to find, even in any grade, it's really hard to get. You compare that to Amazing Fantasy or any of the other Marvel ones, it's like a 10th. It's like really, really hard book to find. But even this one has dropped, and dropped significantly from its pre-COVID pricing. I'm not sure why. Maybe, again, people didn't really like the Flash movie. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a great movie, but it didn't really perform that well. So I recommend people go watch the Flash movie. It's actually a very good movie. Yeah, it was like, it's one of those things. So sometimes, one bad movie can really kill the value of a comic. But that has been the top 10 list of books. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's interesting doing this live. It's much more challenging. I didn't actually say hi to the chat. I'm sorry. I wanted to say hi to the chat, but I wanted this to be a quickly show the market report, and now I'll say quickly hi to everybody in the chat. Hi Johnny Chew Chips. Hi Matt Atkinson. Hi Biggie. Hi to all MJ, and hi Lyle. Hi Emmanuel. Hi Mass Peanut. Hi A Pocket Full of Comics. I recommend people check out his channel. And yeah, thanks for everyone showing up. If you have any questions about the list, this is the time to ask in a way, because normally, I don't get to, I get to answer the questions in the comments, but this is the time when you can ask live. And if you have any feedback about the list, this is the time to ask. So I really do think it was an interesting week. I kind of wanted to look at those historical trend lines to really get a good sense of the market. And it was a little different than the typical list that we do. So, and I just want to quickly say hi to Collecto6, good friend. And he will be joining me on Monday to show some pretty awesome books. And hi to Sleepy Reader. So yeah, thanks everyone for showing up. Yeah, it was just a very impromptu Saturday show. I meant to record this earlier. I just didn't get a chance. I was pretty busy last night. I was on, I did my own show with Steven and Pocketful of Comics and Big B. And then I did a show with Biggie Shaq and Matt Atkinson on his channel. And it was a pretty good, you know, show. I think I definitely recommend if you haven't watched Biggie Shaq's show that had me and Matt Atkinson on it. Definitely watch it. It was we shared a lot of information. Biggie Shaq is a very knowledgeable guy. Matt Atkinson is a really knowledgeable guy. I tried to keep up with the two of the guys. They're very knowledgeable guys. So and hi Candlestick. It's been a while since I've seen you. Um, should you buy coverless copies of a comic? If you can get it for a good price, yes, yes, definitely. Coverless copies actually are useful for multiple reasons. I'm actually looking for a coverless copy for my collection. I need a dynamic comics number 11 coverless copy. I because I have the cover, I don't have the the comic, so I actually want to get a coverless comic. And so there is actually value to the coverless comics, and surprisingly more than most people would uh, expect. And yes, Biggie is correct on that. It should be a complete coverless copy. So there's actually incomplete coverless copies. Actually, way back in the day, when I ordered a comic, somebody threw in a the first appearance of Poison Ivy, Batman 181, um, a coverless copy that was incomplete as well. So it was missing the centerfold. And as a result, I actually used it for trade. I actually got a pretty good trade with it, but it's one of those things that really has very little value compared to if it's coverless and complete, if that makes sense. Um, do you expect Showcase 4 to go back up as memory of the movie fades? I actually think the memory of the movie shouldn't fade. I think people should watch the movie. I think a lot of the time people get bent out of shape. I personally don't like the guy that played the Flash. I really don't like the guy, but he did a good job. He did a good job. It was a good movie. I enjoyed the movie. And I think if people just watched it, you know, they probably realize, hey, Flash is actually a pretty cool character, and the comics would probably get a little bit more love. So a lot of the time that can happen. You get this kind of weird social stigma around a movie that isn't justified. So yeah, and that's why the Flash movie didn't perform that well. Um, yeah, so it's one of those weird things. But if they make another Flash movie, I'm sure, and if they, there's another Flash series, a TV series. If you look at why it was kind of a high valued price back in 2018, it was really because the Flash series was going on and it was a very popular series. If they bring it back, or if they, there's always with these characters, they've been around for like 70 years. Like they're characters that are well loved and established. I'm sure that they'll bring them back and there will be more value in the future. Um, yeah. So yeah, once it gets James Gunn version, I definitely think it would. I'm actually just a quick thing about James Gunn. I'm actually a little bit nervous about James Gunn. James Gunn is good and bad. He can bring excitement to characters and he can really bring out these quirky characters quite well, but he has a tendency of being a little bit disrespectful to the characters. He has a tendency of just killing them off without any regard for their importance or their cool comic history. So there is good and bad with James Gunn. I do enjoy his movies for the most part, but there are times where I feel like, oh man, he's being a little bit disrespectful to these characters. Like he just kills them off willy nilly. It does make you kind of worry about the characters whenever whenever they're in a James Gunn movie. Is he going to kill them all off? So yeah, so that's one thing I was a little bit nervous with James Gunn. I think if he's sort of reined in a little bit, and at the same time has his vision but reined in, if that makes any sense, you can get a good mix, which would be nice. And I think they could do some pretty great things. I'm really looking forward to seeing what his vision will be for the DCU. I think that there is hope there, and I think maybe people have been talking about superhero fatigue with the movies. I actually never believed that. I never believed that. Everyone was saying it, and I never believed it. I said, you can watch my old videos. I talk about this all the time, where I never believed that there was superhero fatigue. Um, what there was fatigue of was bad superhero movie fatigue. We're tired of bad movies. What we really wanted was good superhero movies. If they start producing good movies again, where it's more focused on story rather than anything else, I'm sure they can bring all these classic characters back, because there's so many great stories that they can tell. It's all about telling a great story. It doesn't matter if it's a superhero or whatever. It just tell a great story and people will watch it. So, is it a good time to pick up some good Silver Age DC key comics or just wait? Yeah, actually, it's a good time to pick up Marvel or DC. As I said, the floor on some of the books hasn't been hit yet, and the books are a little bit underrated. The market is soft overall. I mean, these are the big, like this list that I just did are the biggest books. These are the biggest books that you can find. like pretty much all these books are the biggest Silver Age books. Well, there's a lot of books that are right now a little bit undervalued, and you can pick up at historically low prices. Good time to pick them up. It's just do that extra level of research where you go collect, look at the trend line. Is it below the trend line? Pick it up. Basically, that's the way, that's the way you can shop right now, because there's those opportunities where the books are below the trend lines and you can pick them up at a great price. Uh, do you think James Gunn movies could affect the value of older books, even back to the golden age? Yes, definitely. Yeah, I mean, as I said, one good movie, and just that, uh, you know, fans, if you look at a good example of Star Wars. Star Wars has been done so wrong for so long, but the fans keep on going to these things, and it took like many, many, many bad movies, bad TV series to really discourage the fans, because they really want, just they're holding out for hope that there'll be a great Star Wars movie again. Make it great again, and there'll be a great movie, and they're just holding out hope. Is the Mandalorian going to be good? And then they're like, oh, it was good, the first season. And then, so there was hope there. Well, there is that hope with all these golden age characters, silver age characters, that somebody, James Gunn maybe, can produce a good movie that people will want to watch again. And that, and if that happens, people, fans are actually pretty loyal for the most part. If you just give them something that they want, they will support it. So I really do think, if the big movie houses like DC and Marvel do produce something that's worthy of the fans, then you will see a big rush back. People are just dying for it. People are starved for good content. And as I said, it's not hero fatigue, it's bad movie fatigue. And if you just give people a good movie, they will jump to it and they will love it and they will strongly embrace it. It's really up to it's really up to them to just start making story driven shows again. Um, Adventure, detective, and action Silver Age that are minor or non-keys are dropping rapidly. Yeah, I mean, it's it um it is the case that the non-keys are always going to be a little bit more affordable anyways. What you do have is when you have like a comic boom, which we experienced, you know, where prices had gone through the roof and just crazy, what you always have is like a boom bust kind of experience where people will collect a whole bunch of stuff, and you'll get a certain number of people that will leave the market during that bust period where they just say, "Ah, I'm done with comics. No more comics for me." And they will literally fire sale their whole collection. And they're generally what'll end up, the ones that get fire saled the most are the non-keys. So generally you'll get a flood of like the run filler books onto the market. And that means that a lot of those non-key books will generally be sold really cheaply. And you can go check your dollar bins to find a whole bunch of non-keys. Even ones that probably, even though they're non-keys, are still great books from the Silver or Golden Age, um, or even Bronze Age. So yeah, so there are weird things like that that happen with this boom bust kind of a thing. We even see that with the keys to a certain extent, where people have been just sort of flooding the market with their stuff and just sort of not even trying. I was shocked actually with certain books that I've seen on eBay where people weren't even trying. They weren't even trying to get a good price. They were just they were just like, okay, I'm just getting rid of this book, and you get some really amazing sales. If you watch the eBay buy it nows and auctions, there are some major deals that you can find where people are just they're not even trying. You know, it's the weirdest thing, and but it is a good time if you're a collector. A little bit hard on the pocketbook, but there's so many deals. But it is a good time to be a collector. West Coast Avengers have dipped. I think people should have grabbed them. Yeah, I actually think there's some potential there. I mean, they were massively produced though. They're massively fastest comics. Always interesting here to collect. And I got 10 issues of West Coast Avengers in a dollar bin last show. Yeah, I mean, West Coast Avengers, for the most part, has always been kind of a cheaper run to get. You know, I always associate with Dollar Bin personally, uh, and it's just one of those things that they were massively produced. You know, it is what it is. Um, a good advice. What's overpriced run? In my opinion, Dave Stevens' Roof is coming. Um, so yeah, so Dave Stephen books have actually been another one of these. Again, this is what I was talking about with produce something great and people will flock to it. The Dave Stevens biography was a very good documentary, drawn to perfection. Watch it. It kind of is a bit heart wrenching because you see this guy and that he's a perfectionist. He's just like, you know, they in the story they're like he uses the eraser more than he uses the pencil because he's constantly like criticizing his own work and like being very particular about it, like where he spends like weeks just to do one detail on a drawing. And that kind of level of artistry really inspires fans. It's like, wow, this guy is so cool. And because of that, that documentary, as I said, produced something great and make produces that huge interest. People are dying for this kind of content. So what ends up happening is there's a flood of people that become Dave Stevens fans. So what ends up happening is you get the market kind of reacting and overreacting. A lot of the Dave Stevens books are actually overpriced, but uh, I expect them to be up overall, but not to the levels that we see. I'm seeing books selling for 10 times what they should. So, you know, they were a lot of these books during the 80s and 90s, that sort of Dave Stevens era, were massively produced, and, you know, there are out there. So just be a little bit cautious. Look, you know, if you have a comic store that has back issues that haven't been pulling out the Dave Stevens stuff, you can still find a lot of Dave Stevens artwork affordably. So just be a little cautious with it. Um, Chris, so watching your channel has exposed me to timely good girl, like behind you. Do you see this as a market that is due? What are some of the big covers slash artists? Uh, so good girl art has really been popular for a while. It's actually if you actually look at modern books, this is one of the things like that people don't realize. If you look at modern books, we got like millions and millions of variant covers, and what it is, the reason we have so many variant covers, if you look at the covers, what are the ones that are selling? It's all good girl art. It's like some sexy girl on the cover, and those ones sell for big money. Well, when people start collecting Golden Age, it's the same kind of books that sell. So good girl art has always been popular because majority of collectors are men, and it's just the way it is. And even women like seeing sexy women on the cover. It's the weirdest thing. So good girl art has always been popular, and the artists that are associated with most associated in the Golden Age with good girl are ones like Alex Schomburg, Matt Baker, Jack Kamen, Al Felstein. There's some really great good girl art that he did. There's Bob Montana, um, Harry Lucy, I should say, Harry Lucy, um, uh, Dan DeCarlo, Bill Ward. Those are all really great good girl artists that people collect. LB Cole has some really great good girl art as well. And the market for those books is fairly strong, and the pricing is kind of kind of high. You know, there are opportunities, but it's not. It has been very tapped into that market. Um, Generally, what you have to do is, oh yes, Al Ulmer. Yes, there's a whole bunch. I'm just giving you a very, uh, uh, you know, very quick number of names. I mean, there's like so many. There's Kinsler as well. There's Bill. There's Bill Graham, or Graham Engels, I should say. Graham Engels. Messed up the name. Um, there's a whole bunch. There's a whole bunch of really great golden age good girl artists, because good girl was such a major thing in comics. It's really the era of good girl is really 1947 to 1949 era, but then it really filtered into everything after that. Like if you look at pre-code horror, if you look into crime, if you look into romance, those all had a lot of good girl art covers. So there's a lot of that. Red Sonja, Vampirella have 3 to 6 covers a month. Oh, good girl, exactly. Um, so yeah, those books have way too many variant covers, and because I'm a collector, it drives me crazy because it's just like, oh no, I got 20 Vampirellas today. It's just like so many variant covers. And yeah, Steppo's favorite is Basil Wolverton. Yes, he loves. I don't know why, but he loves Basil Wolverton so much. That's his favorite good girl artist. Actually, there are some really great good girl art covers by Basil Wolverton. Strangely enough, um, yeah, I did mention Bob Montana. So yeah, most Zenoscope. I think Zenoscope is good girl art. That's their whole thing. That's like, you know, and Stephen is not agreeing for some reason. I don't know why. Um, so yeah, yeah, I mean, it is one of those things. I do feel like good girl art has been highly um, bought into. There are opportunities in the good girl art. The one that my good friend Night Tiger Comics keeps on going on about is good girl art westerns. That is one genre of good girl art that has been sort of overlooked for the most part, and a little bit in the romance. There is opportunities somewhere, like somewhat in the romance ones, but you know, those are be the big ones. But westerns, for the most part, have been ignored. Even Matt Baker in westerns has been ignored, and there's real opportunities because he did a bunch of westerns, and even LB Cole. If Pocketful is still here, he has a good example of Flaming Western Love Romance, I think it's called, where it's a good girl art cover, but Western, and it's a really great cover. And so there are opportunities. It's just that you have to kind of go a little bit off, like outside of the normal, what most people think, you know? And that's where, a couple of tricks that I've mentioned this before in previous videos, is what I'll do is search by the artist on eBay. And generally what you'll find is, like, if you search Matt Baker, every book is overpriced. Just every book is overpriced. However, what it does do is it helps you find the titles. You can also do this through My Comic Shop, ding, if, for all those people that appreciate the ding sound. What you do is you search by artist on My Comic Shop, and then what you do is you find all of the cover titles that they did. And I do the same on eBay. So the point is, you find all the titles. And then what you do is you make a list of those titles, and then search for those titles. Now, not always is the case that people know who the artist is. A lot of the time in the golden age, the cover wouldn't say who the artist was. So if you don't know, you don't know. And a lot of the time you can find, and I have found books where they didn't realize it was a Matt Baker, or they didn't realize it was some more established artist, and I picked up the books very, very affordably. There's actually a lot that I'm bidding on right now. It has over 30 romance books in it, and the price is going to be it's going to be pennies on the book. It's going to be, if I win it, it's going to be really cheap, and it has Matt Baker. It has a whole bunch of famous books in it. It's just that the people don't know what they're selling, and they didn't list the auction very well. So it's one I'm hoping that I'll win. So maybe you'll see that in a future unboxing. It's crazy. But I'm hoping I'll win that. Somebody else is also bidding on it, so it's gonna be one of those things. But Matt Baker and Robin Hood comics is ignored. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And what are some of the more sought after pulp series? So the ones that, again, it's back to, you can use your knowledge of comics and translate that over to pulps to a certain extent. With pulps, it really is about that cover, especially now that they're getting graded. So you want to get ones with the more well-established artists. Some of the well-established artists are like the Earl Burgley, and then the Brundages, Margaret Brundage. There's like a whole bunch. I'm really not as good on remembering the names, but even Alex Schomburg did pulp covers. So titles that you would be looking for would be like anything with spicy. Like, look for spicy and you'll see what I mean. Spicy adventures, spicy adult adventures. There's like a whole bunch of spicy ones. There's also Weird Tales. They have a lot of great Brundage covers. Yeah, Earl Bergy. Okay, I always mess up his name. I always put an extra L in the Bergy part. And so yeah, you put an extra L in the Earl. So we kind of win. Okay, so there are some really great artists. And again, it's looking for the kind of covers that appeal to you from comics. There's actually better covers in the pulps. And that's really why I actually was speculating on pulps, because I actually believe in the covers. I think the covers are so artistic compared to even the comics. Like, a lot of them are airbrush covers, a lot of them are painted covers. There are some really brilliant covers from the pulps. And because of that, you get the potential once they're slabbed, and you can ignore the pulpiness of them, and it's just all about the cover at that point. You can get some real art, appreciation of those art for those comics. I'm actually in a future unboxing, I'm getting my very first slabbed pulp coming to me. That will be in 3 unboxings in the future. It's like, I'm just trying to think of, because it's like I bought so many things and now they're all like scheduled to like months in advance. So yeah, so there is a like a pulp coming my way that is my first slab pulp. But I was buying it based on the cover. Just look at that cover. So what does it have? Does it have Good Girl? Does it have skulls? Does it have some crazy horror element? These are the same things that we learned from buying comics. Um, uh, yeah, so magazine and Good Girl covers from the 30s to 50s with um, Merle Gribben, and Simon, etc. are fun too. Yes. So yeah, I mean, there's lots of really great. Peter Dribbin, I really like. I think he's really awesome. Um, yeah, and he did a lot of magazine covers like Beauty Parade and like why am I blanking on some of the names? But there's like a whole bunch, Flickr and all those ones. Um, Do you know of any Russian comic book artists? No, I really don't. I can't, I can't lie and say I know a whole bunch. No, I don't know any. Actually, I can't think of any Russian ones. There's probably ones that are Russian. I just didn't realize that they're Russian. But I'm not as familiar with Russian comic book artists. I'm sorry, but most of the ones that I know are American, just because that's primarily where comics were created. Um, Tessa is a nerd posted she bought her first pulp. It's a bit of a good girl cover. That's cool. So yeah, so I think a lot of people are kind of getting into pulps now. Um, I wouldn't buy pulps right now. I wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole, tell you the truth. Uh, because of the fact right now they're overpriced. Actually, you got to be a little bit careful right now because what's happened is you get a lot of people who are slabbing their pulps and they're basically taking the price and timesing it by 10. And I've seen that a lot where the prices of pulps have been kind of overly compensated. And it's a lot of these pulp collectors who have high hopes for what the market will be. And I think they have bit too high, bit too high hopes for the market. I do think there should be an increase in value, but not 10 times, not to the levels that you see. Like I've seen books literally that were like 20 to $30 being listed at five, six, $700. And it's just like, yeah, no, I'm not gonna buy that book. So just be a little bit cautious. It is one of those things you do have to learn. Um, Generally, if you're going to buy pulps, I'd actually recommend buying them raw and then getting them graded. That's probably the way to go because the raw ones still haven't been pushed up. It's the slabbed copies that are generally overpriced right now. Um, Actually, the funny thing was Heritage recently had an auction, like the auction that I just described, um, where there was a bunch of pulps. And now what they're doing with the pulps, just so you know, is it used to be that whenever you have like Golden Age, like the way it works is Sundays are Golden Age comics on Heritage, and Mondays are Silver Age. And so what happened was it used to be that at the end of the Golden Age, they would put the pulps. So after you watched all the Golden Age auctions, then they would put pulps at the end. Okay, that's the old method. This week, they switched that method, and now they're putting pulps at the very beginning and then the Golden Age. So I actually bid on I think about six pulps, six pulps that were slabbed. And I thought maybe like that, I was going for ones with cool covers and just sort of fun things. I lost every single time. I didn't win any of them. Um, but they were going for around a half what I saw them going for on eBay. So I think if you're going to buy pulps, actually buying them off Heritage is probably the best place if you're going for the slab copies, because the prices are much more in line with what the real market is. Because the ones that are buying those pulps are the pulp collectors, and that know what the prices should be. And I actually saw that the prices were kind of going with where I would expect them to go, rather than some inflated price. So just so you know, just watch for that. Um, there is good that they're getting slabbed, because yeah, they were just, yeah, you're right, they were just turning to dust. The If you look at, like, I have so many pulps up above. If you look up on my slabs, behind the very top row, which you can't actually see on the camera, um, it's all pulps. It's like I have about 300-400 pulps in my collection. Like, they're all up there, and it's just in boxes. So yeah, but I have them in bags, and they're just like, they're turning to powder. It's just, it is what they are. Just the pulps were like the worst quality paper. Yeah, cheap pulp paper were like Canadian whites, pump and dump, market, pump and dump dollars, pump slabs, and are with us until the slab pulp novelty wears off. You're right. So what I think is going to happen is actually, right now we don't have a census with the pulps. Like, with comics, we really have an established census, and even that changes where people are constantly getting new books graded. With the pulps, that is getting established, and once it gets established and we kind of know how many of these books there really are out there, and what the values are, because there'll be more of a sales history then. Once that gets more established, then we can say, okay, this book is worth this much. That's one of the things that does come with slabbing the books, that you get that establishment of this book is worth this much per point. And once that happens, you will get a price correction. So what's going to happen is, right now the market's kind of going like this. It's going to crash. It's not going to crash. So just like what we saw with the list, just so you know, the list where it basically looked like, oh man, the market is like just crashed. Well, what's going to happen is, if you look at the market, it's more like this, and then a jump, and then back, but it's actually still higher than that original price. So that's what's going to happen with pulps. It's going to kind of go well beyond where it should, and then it's going to come back to more in line with that established price, probably slightly higher than that trend line would have been, because there is more market certainty. And whenever you have more certainty about anything, this is why you get books graded, there's actually value to that, and that actually adds more value to the books. That's why a slab book versus an unslabbed book is always going to be worth 30 to 40% more, just because it has some credibility, it has some establishment of the grade and the price and all that kind of stuff. So it's just one of those things. Um, I tell people all the time, it doesn't matter if $5,000 or $6,000 if you paid $300 for it. Yeah, it's really like, I always like the sort of the accurate, the the phrase or the expression that things are worth as much as somebody's willing to pay for it. And that's really the definition of how much something is worth. How much is somebody willing to pay for it? If somebody's willing to pay $1 million for something, that's how much it's worth. So, um, so yeah, so it's there's no intrinsic value to anything. You know, that's one of the criticisms when I made my video about the market. And I was talking about 5 things that I said why comic collecting is a good investment. Is they were saying, oh, but comics have no intrinsic value. Well, actually, there is nothing with intrinsic value. Okay, like, I know, like, that sounds like heresy, like, oh, but gold has intrinsic value, water has intrinsic value, oil has no, there's anything. The intrinsic value means that there's something where it will be worth X dollars no matter what. Well, that's not true. If you're in an ocean, the value of water is really not that valuable. It's really not that valuable. But if you're in the desert, well, that water all of a sudden becomes super valuable. So there is no intrinsic value to water. It's really circumstantial, and it's based on what somebody's willing to pay for, what people perceive the value to be. Well, comics are no different than that. But generally, what we do have with both water and comics is a situation where we have a perception of value. And that perception of value is very, very important. We have a memory that this book sold for X dollars in the past. And that will kind of tweak, that value. It's not an intrinsic value, but it is a value that we do perceive. And we say, okay, this book sold for $1,000 in the past. It has to be worth close to that in the future, and even if it's a price that was inflated or whatever, that does make us feel that there will be a point where it'll regain that value, even when the market is dropping. So what generally ends up happening is when you have like a boom bust cycle, is just like with the boom part, where people overly get excited and speculate, and overly inflate the market. You'll get on the bust side, you'll get people getting very, very scared and panicking that, oh, I'm not going to get any value from my comic. And then there'll be a point where people will be like, well, I actually think that this comic book is underpriced. And so it's not like they say, well, there's an established price. It doesn't work that way. But there is that feeling that we have, just something as collectors, where we say, hey, this book is kind of underpriced now, and it's a good time to pick it up. And generally that will be the point where the comic hits the floor, and it'll kind of return back into value, because collectors will suddenly like, oh, I got to pick it up. There's this new hype where, is this the time to buy? Has it finally hit that floor? Is it going to be like, this is the cheapest time to buy comics? And that's what we're seeing now. Actually, I'm seeing that more and more now, where people are getting excited that they can find these buying opportunities. And, that's what happens. It's the great thing about capitalism, where you get these kind of boom busts. So yeah, so that was, I don't know, that's kind of my opinion on all of that stuff. I kind of can ramble forever and ever. So if anyone else has any questions, feel free to ask. I will stay for a little bit longer and answer any questions. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Like, I have 27 people watching. I hope I have at least 27 likes. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. And watch all my videos, watch all the ads in my videos so I can make money. And just, I hope you enjoyed this video. That's really the whole reason I do these things. And stay tuned for tomorrow's video, where I'm going to do the hottest Golden Age books. That's going to be interesting. It's the same list, like I went to Heritage, and I basically just took the biggest sales, and I'm going to report on them. And there's some really cool books that I have not seen and haven't been on the market for like 10 years that have come up, and it's like, wow, this is really cool. So there's some pretty cool books on tomorrow's list. What is the first appearance of the Green Llama? I have to look that up, actually. I actually have it on my want list. Is it right? Double Jest Digest, Volume 5, Number 5? I don't think that's right for some reason. But yeah. So yeah, so get ready to buy that LB Cole Drac for $30. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, so again, thank you for everyone watching. Bye for now, and stay tuned. Okay, bye.